Yeah, good to be with everybody. It's actually, I was kind of laughing as I was pulling these slides together because with the charging and fueling infrastructure grant called CFI, have already been connecting with a number of PCFO community partners. So indeed, consider this a part of keeping the conversation going. And if you haven't had the chance to jump on the line, more than happy to connect as follow-up to this. So as a place to start, we'll just start with some of the high-level takeaways from the CFI grant and also some key callouts for what has changed in the second round of the program being issued. Our first round was run last year. So with all that as the baseline, the above the fold pieces. So second round just released middle of May. What's great is the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, who oversees this program, they gave us a longer lead time for applications going in. So everything is due August 28th. While that still feels like a relatively crunched period of time, it does give us some breathing room for different communities to pull together their grant applications. One thing to that, and we'll go through a little bit on the changes to the NOFO, there are some overall, in a general sense, more leniency that's been given. So both in the sense of what type of either community or corridor programs can be accepted and entertained. And this is everything from encouraged types of projects or even allowing charging deployment farther away from what are called alternative fuel corridors. These are designated corridors that run throughout the state. Previously, it was 1 mile away from designated corridors, and it opened it up to 5 miles away, which really helps open up a lot more purview, lets it get more to the core of different cities and communities. But as we get into that, and again, it's a significant sum of money here, $1.3 billion. There technically was only $500 million allocated for this second round. Still a significant sum of money, to be clear. But what has happened is the FHWA took some residual funds from last year's CFI round of money and some NEVI dollars. That's the National EV Infrastructure Program, which flows to the state of Ohio, specifically Drive Ohio, which administers that on behalf of the state. But took some of these different funds, combined it together to get $1.3 billion, a large sum, the largest ever spent on charging infrastructure deployment. But right off the bat, just with some of these deadlines and things in mind, there are those in the room that maybe were party to a round one submission that was not awarded. And that would essentially be anyone that was not a part of either the SOPEC application, which was running a good portion of Southern Ohio, or NOACA, which is the Council of Government and Municipal Planning Organization for Northeast Ohio. A really cool moment. You're allowed to resubmit your round one applications. This is honestly the first and only time I've ever seen this in all the federal grant work that I get to do. It's just an honest recognition of there were many significant projects that were submitted and not enough money to go around. So for those that maybe were party to a round one application, for instance, here in Central Ohio, I'm based out of Columbus, MORPC did do a grant submission. I know there was some other action going on down in the Cincinnati and Southwest parts of the state. There's a resubmission option. It is as easy as sending an email back to FHWA acknowledging that the application need be resubmitted, and that's it. It's really a significant opportunity to double down on your projects. So something that we're more than happy to connect with folks on navigating that. That is due back by July 1st. So that timestamp is coming really quick next week. But overall, a great opportunity for resubmitting round one applications. If you go to the next slide, Cassandra. So like I mentioned, just to compare and contrast some of the general changes from round two, and there is we have a more full roster and inventory, happy to share it back with folks. The biggest things is the significant larger sum of money coming through. Like I alluded to, what this really means is while it will still be a very competitive grant application round, only about 4% of applicants were awarded last year, just to give you a quick statistical readout of the 48 awarded applicants. While it is still expected to be very competitive, it is also expected that there be more awards that go out too, which it's always going to be a challenge to be sure you have the best and brightest content going in. But it is definitely worth also taking a look at how you might be able to be a part of a round two application. There's a lot more I'm happy to share with folks and connect on, but if there's a simplest takeaway, it's really taking stock of how you might be able to bring together a broader regional application. Overall, from round one awards, we saw more awards going to multi-city applications or regional applications rather than a single city going it alone. We also saw a significant award going to community-focused projects rather than corridor projects too. So there's a lot of other things that you can be sure to build into that. And the next couple slides actually highlight some of these general rule changes we saw in round two, especially help folks get the cogs turning and thinking through what different project options could look like. So on the next slide, and also I'll fully acknowledge some of you may have caught, these are slide samples from a joint webinar that EC and our colleagues over at Fourth did. So apologies if you tuned into that webinar. Just doing this a little bit as a condensed format, and definitely happy to answer any questions you might have coming off of that too. So next three slides, they are specific callouts. These are big things that we saw either in round one or new changes from round two. So the first one is community engagement. This was a subtle, only a couple lines that was included in round one applications, but something we saw that noticeably showed up in more winning applicants than not. So this is the exact language from the NOFO, but it is educational and community engagement activities. So everything from consumer engagement, ride and drive event programming, working with dealers and doing various pop-up events or festival appearance. There's a lot of ways that you can spin this. We're really excited on that overall because it is a way that you can really think not just about how you're getting charging in the ground and hopefully making it available for wide use, but also how do you engage with your local community? Many in this room are already familiar with what's called community benefit plans, which are required for any bipartisan infrastructure law funded programming, as well as Justice 40 initiative. This community engagement assignment, it's an opportunity to really put money to that and really think about how are you going to be engaging and dialing into the community. So can't emphasize enough, really thinking about how this can play into projects that you have coming together. Next slide, please. And also confirm, I saw in the chat, all these links are hyperlinked. Slides will be going out, so can definitely click on these things for sure. Another thing that was noticeably called out in a great way and exciting to see it is multifamily housing charging. So this is everything from apartments, condos, anything that is a multifamily or multi-tenant complex. It was specifically called out in round two. This wasn't the case in round one. It's also just a great way to recognize this isn't just for public governments to think about how they're putting a project together. You can bring in private partners, site hosts, and a whole mix of various community partners. Statistically speaking, access to charging is the #1 barrier and hindrance to EV adoption, and it will most likely remain that for years to come. Multifamily housing, highest concentration of residents as well. So it is a great way to tackle that type of barrier and hindrance head on, and a great opportunity to really engage and work with development and multifamily housing community too. A lot of links there. Our friends over at Fourth have been doing a lot of work on that. We're actually launching a multifamily housing program yet this summer that's going to be really focused on this too. So more than happy to connect on that. And on the next slide, we also call it another specific segment of charging, workplace charging. So again, workplaces, as everyone it has been getting back into the office over the last couple of years, it's a great place to really think about partnering on charging deployment. The workplace statistically is the second most place your vehicle spends its time, second to your home. So it's a great way to really think about low cost charging, and also can be a great way to bring in those community partnerships. A good example, for instance, are maybe those downtown workplaces that do have parking space that's flexible, so it's also public charging and can then be used for other point interest or other events going on in the downtown, such as a baseball game, something going on in the theater district, the likes of that. This is a great way to think about how you can increase utilization of charging.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie Nutter. I'm the lead technical consultant for Power Clean Future Ohio. As part of this grant forecast, we really wanted to take a look at what some of the grants were that we're going to be opening up this fall to give you all a preview and get you thinking about some additional opportunities. And that is, of course, Brownfields. So next slide. So the EPA Brownfields program began back in 1995 and has provided nearly $2.7 billion in grants, funding to assess and clean up contaminated properties and return blighted properties to productive reuse. The goal of this EPA program is to provide both grants and technical assistance to assess, safely clean up, and sustainably reuse contaminated properties. So that we all have a collective sense of the focus of brownfields and how the EPA defines brownfields. The definition is properties that contain or may contain a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant, complicating efforts to expand, redevelop, or reuse them. So through this overarching program, the EPA offers a number of different types of brownfield grants, and these include assessment grants, cleanup grants, revolving loan fund grants, job training grants, and multi-purpose grants. The multi-purpose grant is one grant that is not expected to be released this year, so we don't cover that in this presentation. If you want more information on that for next year, check out EPA's website. So just to get a sense of who is eligible for these brownfield grants, eligible entities for all of these types of brownfield grants, with just a couple exceptions, are local governments, land clearance authorities, regional councils, state chartered redevelopment agencies, states, federally recognized tribes, nonprofit organizations, qualified community development entities. And as I mentioned, there are a few exceptions to the eligibility, which we will review. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just spend a few minutes detailing what can be funded through each type of grant opportunity. The first are assessment grants. So assessment grants can help to create a foundation to understand the impacts of brownfields in your community and to plan for cleanup and reuse. So we call these kind of foundational grants. Projects that are funded by assessment grants can be used to do things like inventory sites, assess contamination, conduct site-specific planning for cleanup and redevelopment, and engage the community. Under the assessment grants, there are three specific types of grants, which I will mention. The first is a countywide assessment grant, and these are really best for communities that are just beginning to address their brownfield challenges, as well as for communities that have ongoing efforts to bring sites into productive use. Eligible entities for these grants, out of the list that I mentioned before, may request up to $500,000 for those types of grants. The second type of assessment grant is a coalition grant, which is designed to bring together one lead applicant with 2 to 4 partners. Applicants are required to assess at least 2 sites in each partner's geography, and this grant is slightly more, so eligible entities may request up to $1 million for the assessment coalition grants. And then finally, under this category type, there is the community-wide assessment grants for states and tribes. This eligibility is limited. It's limited to states, tribes, and native corporations in Alaska. Applicants are expected to target work in disadvantaged communities and work with communities that do not have the capacity to apply for and manage their own brownfield grant. So this is the largest of the assessment grants. Recipients are required to assess at least 10 brownfields and may request up to $2 million. It is worth noting there's no cost share for any of these types of grants, and this is one of the first that we do expect to open up this September. The next type of grant are cleanup grants. Again, we think of this as sort of a foundational grant for your community. Cleanup grants can provide an opportunity to mitigate environmental justice and pollution concerns affecting disadvantaged communities. So these cleanup grants provide funding for a recipient to carry out different types of cleanup activities at brownfield sites that are owned by the applicant. Funds may be used to address sites contaminated by petroleum, or other hazardous substances, pollutants, and contaminants. An applicant may request funding to address either a single brownfield site or multiple brownfield sites within the same application, and applicants may request up to $2 million. It is important to note that for these cleanup grants, a 20% cost share is required. Next slide. And that one we are expecting to open in September as well. So the third type of grant is the revolving loan fund grant, which can provide sustainable, lasting capital to remediate brownfields in your community. The revolving loan fund grants provide funding for a grant recipient to capitalize a revolving loan fund and to provide loans and subgrants to carry out cleanup activities at brownfield sites. When the loans are repaid, the loan amount is returned to the fund and relent to other borrowers, providing an ongoing source of capital within the community. Applicants can either apply as an individual entity or as a coalition. Award sizes are up to $1 million, and at least 50% of the funds must be used for loans. This one also does have a 20% cost share requirement, and we expect this to open in September. And then the fourth and final type of federal grant for brownfields that we wanted to cover is the Brownfields Job Training Grant. This is a grant opportunity which offers the chance to build a local green workforce. These job training grants provide funding to deliver trainings to unemployed and underemployed residents for communities that are impacted by brownfields. So training can include topics such as hazardous waste management, green infrastructure, environmental health and safety, energy efficiency, climate change and mitigation and adaptation. The maximum award size for these training grants is $500,000 and no cost share is required. One important note is, as you might imagine, equity and environmental justice are important aspects of this program. Applications will be reviewed more favorably if the applicant targets high-need individuals who are impacted by environmental and socioeconomic challenges. Next slide. So in addition to the federal grant opportunities, the state of Ohio does also offer brownfield funding. And this is through their Brownfield Loan Program. This grant opportunity is led by the Ohio Water Development Authority Board, and the Brownfield Loan Program provides funding for the remediation of contaminated properties. Eligible entities include local governments and private entities that own or control an eligible brownfield in Ohio. The maximum loan amount for an environmental assessment through this program is $500,000. The maximum loan increase for assessment and remediation projects is $5 million. This is an interesting opportunity because applications are reviewed on a rolling basis. They do recommend, if you plan to apply, to first connect with a loan officer before submitting your application to discuss it, but there's no deadline for this application. Next slide. So one of the things that we, of course, wanted to do in light of the fact that a number of these brownfield grants are going to be opening up this fall is discuss some of the opportunities for what you would do with a cleanup site. And I know the cities and communities that are on the call have a wide variety of experience doing brownfields work. So wanted to talk a little bit about this brownfields to Brightfields concept. So while many of you, I'm sure, have previously pursued brownfield assessment and cleanup funds to improve a local contaminated site, again, we do want to highlight the opportunity to leverage these remediated sites for clean energy projects. They are known as brownfields to Brightfields, and cities can turn vacant or underutilized properties into facilities that improve the local tax base, create jobs, leverage additional financial incentives, and deliver clean energy to the community. Many of these benefits I know are familiar to a lot of you, but if you are thinking of siting clean energy on brownfields, it could do everything from leverage underutilized infrastructure, save funds through tax incentives, reduce project times through streamlined permitting and zoning, create new jobs, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase resilience in the community, provide low-cost clean energy to communities, and also generate community support through land revitalization efforts. So some of the more prominent brownfields to Brightfield projects that we've seen are community solar developments, solar fields, and wind farms. Next slide. So for those of you that are still considering and thinking about where the brownfields exist in your community and want more specific information, there are several publicly available mapping tools that you can use to identify brownfields in your community and evaluate these sites for solar potential in particular. So we'll review a couple of these briefly here. The first is the Enviro Atlas for Brownfields, which is offered by the EPA and is a free web-based mapping tool that can help you tell the story about the status of your local environment, your residents, and contaminated sites through overlaying multiple sources of data with sites and creating custom maps to support planning and decision-making. EPA also offers a second tool, which is called Repowering Mapper. This allows users to identify contaminated lands, landfills, and mine sites for renewable energy development, and they use criteria from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. EPA has screened over 190,000 sites for renewable energy potential, so that's an interesting one to check out as well. The last one that we wanted to highlight is another tool called Mining the Sun. It was recently released by the Nature Conservancy, and it's a tool that identifies the overlap of mine lands and brownfields within solar suitability areas by analyzing suitable land. Based on their analysis, there are roughly 567,000 acres of mine lands, mostly in eastern Ohio, with access to transmission lines that are potentially suitable for renewable energy development. And across Ohio overall, there are nearly 300 brownfield sites totaling over 50,000 acres that are located near transmission and potentially suitable for both community scale and utility scale solar projects. So some interesting stats there. Next slide. Great. So then couple of other slides, and then we'll get to the discussion. We did, of course, want to make sure we mentioned leveraging IRA tax credits. As I'm sure many of you know, governments and other tax exempt entities can access a 30% investment tax credit for clean energy projects through elective pay. So the two bonus tax credits that are relevant specifically to Brightfield developments are first, the Energy Community Bonus Credit, which provides a 10% tax credit for projects located in energy communities that include brownfields. Then the second credit is the Low Income Communities Bonus Credit, which provides 10% for projects in low income communities or on Indian land, and 20% for projects that are part of a qualified low-income residential building or provide at least 50% of its output to low-income households. So in total, your clean energy project could receive up to 60% in total funding from tax credits by leveraging these bonus credits. If you do want more information about this, please check out the PCFO website or contact PCFO directly for some additional guidance. Now that we've discussed the grant opportunities, we just wanted to highlight two case studies. Next slide. The first is the East Main Street solar field. This we thought it was a great example of a brownfield to Brightfield project. It's the City of Newark and AEP onsite partners who developed a 3,000 module solar field on the former Newark processing property, an aluminum manufacturing facility that was vacant for about 15 years. The city received $2 million in state grants to clean up and prepare the 66-acre site for redevelopment. The new solar development will provide 25% of the municipal wastewater treatment plant's energy needs. Next slide. And then the other case study, just to highlight, is Cuyahoga County and IGS Solar developed a 4-megawatt solar array on 17 acres of closed landfill in the city of Brooklyn. The county provided just about $8 million of the total $10 million that was needed, and which will be paid through energy purchasing. The solar development will power 16 county buildings, resulting in $3 million saved over 25 years. Next slide. So lastly, just to wrap up the section, we wanted to highlight that there are a number of technical assistance programs to help you with your brownfield sites and your projects. The first is the Technical Assistance to Brownfields Communities program from EPA. That's through Kansas State University and Region 5, which provides no-cost technical assistance to public entities, including preparing brownfield grant applications, site inventories, site analysis, as well as planning, cleanup, and redevelopment. There is also a state program, which is the Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program, that provides property assessment services at no cost to local government applicants. And support services include things like environmental assessments, site surveys, and cleanup plans. And then finally, of course, just to mention again that there is technical assistance available through the PCFO IGAP team. So please reach out to us and set up a one-on-one meeting if you do have any other technical assistance needs. So we're excited to continue to support PCFO communities on your brownfield projects, since, as you know, doing brownfield activities can have a whole host of benefits, from protecting public health, encouraging sustainable reuse, promoting partnerships, and creating jobs. So thank you again for attending today's discussion.
And thank you everyone for participating today. Your insights and questions and engagement are what make these gatherings successful and really enjoyable for all of us. So we'll be sending out the recordings and resources from today and be posting them on our website as well. So there will be follow-up of all of the information that we shared today. And then in the meantime, before our next meeting, which is TBD on when that will be, we do have, as always, our grant snapshots available on our website. We have some of the grants that we talked about today. We have the CFI Round 2 awards highlighted on this slide, which are currently up on our website as well. The Communities Taking Charge Accelerator, the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program, or ATIIP. And then if you could go to the next slide, Cassandra. We've also got Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles Grant, the Brownfields Job Training Grants that we went over today, Safe Streets and Roads for All, and of course the EPA's Community Change Grants program. So these are some of the current federal funding opportunities, all of which are spotlighted on PCFO's website. And I will pop the link in the chat to where these live on our website. So once again, thank you all so much for coming today and engaging with us. And we are really looking forward to seeing you at the next IGAP Grants Forecast call. And in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to PCFO for support. Thank you.